This is amazing. Now we have function calling in Mistral, which means you are able to integrate your own application with this large language model. Imagine you are asking what is the stock price of Apple to the large language model Mistral. This is how the response is going to be like. I don't have a real-time data or the ability to browse the internet. But imagine you have a tool which can get the stock price in real time. How can you integrate that tool with Mistral? That's when we have function calling. So when I ask what is the stock price of Apple, the Mistral model will use the function calling method, then that is passed to the get stock price application which you have created, and your tool respond with the price. Finally, the large language model, that is Mistral, is able to respond with the accurate stock price of Apple. That's exactly what we're going to see today. Let's get started. Hi everyone, I'm really excited to show you about function calling in Mistral. We are going to see two examples. One is integrating a stock price application, and the second one is checking the payment status. I'm going to take you through step by step on how to implement this. But before that, I regularly create videos in regards to artificial intelligence on my YouTube channel. So do subscribe and click the bell icon to stay tuned. Make sure you click the like button so this video can be helpful for many others like you. First, pip install Mistral AI, Pandas, Y-Finance and Rich. So these are optional. Mistral AI is the main package. Just because we are going to integrate our own application, we'll be using these. Next, export your Mistral API key like this, which you can generate from Mistral console, and then click enter. Now create a file called app.py and let's open it. First, import pandas as PD, function tools and JSON, rich print, Yahoo Finance, Mistral client, chat message. Now we are defining the model and initiating the class. These are the basic settings. Mistral client and chat message is the required functions. We are going to use pandas, JSON, Yahoo Finance to create our own program and integrate that with Mistral. Rich print is just for printing in a clear format. Now we are going to do two things. One, we are going to run Mistral model without function calling and see what is going to happen. Then we'll add function calling and see the response. So now defining the user query, what is the stock price of Apple? Just printing for our reference. Next, defining the messages list with role user and passing the user query. Next, response equals client.chat and providing the model name and messages. Finally, you're printing the response. So we are just asking the question to the large language model using client.chat and finally printing the response. Now I'm going to run this code without function calling. Python app.py and then click enter. Now here is the response. What's the stock price of Apple? That's the question. And here is the response from large language model. I don't have real-time data or the ability to browse the internet. So I can't provide the current stock price of Apple. So a large language model can't do all the things. So imagine you have an application which can generate stock price in real time. Then you can integrate that with Mistral model to get an accurate response. Now we are going to do that. So we just saw without function calling, when we ask a question to the large language model, it responded with I don't have a real-time data. Now we are going to add function calling and going to get the accurate result. So this involves additional two steps. One is adding the tool. Another one is calling the tool or running the tool. We are going to see that with the example. So now I'm going to delete this and going to add the get stock price function. So going to create a function called get stock price. This will automatically return the stock price of Apple. So this could be your own application, own API. Just for an example, I'm using this. So when I send the symbol of Apple to this function, this will automatically respond with the current stock price. Now we are going to define the schema for this function. So we are defining a variable called tools. There we are explaining to the large language model what this function will do. So this is a function with the name get stock price. It can get the current stock price of the company. And we are mentioning that the only required field is the symbol, that is AAPL. For Apple. So the large language model, which is Mistral, can understand this and provide the required symbol to get the current stock price. Now we are defining variable called names to function. This is used later in the program. Now providing an example user query, that is what's the stock price of Apple, and we are printing for our reference. Next, providing that question in the chat message function. Now we need to send this message to the large language model. So client.chat, and then we are passing the model, the messages, and the tools list. That's the one which we created earlier. Then tool choice is auto. So that means the large language model can choose which tool to use automatically. Imagine you have probably 10 tools. Currently we have only one tool, but when we use auto, it can automatically choose what tool to use or whether to use a tool or not. Next, messages.append. So we are adding this response back to the messages list. That is like the history. History is getting stored like the context. So the large language model can understand in future the previous conversation and respond accordingly. Now we are printing the messages. So only thing difference is that we added the tools and tools choice. Now we are going to run this code. Python app.py, and here is the response. What's the stock price of Apple? And here is the response from the large language model. It is saying function calling. It's providing the get stock price and the symbol Apple. So now we are going to parse this data and then run this function and return the response back to the large language model. So to parse the data, so now execute function, tool call, and getting the tool name, and further getting the function name. Next, getting the function parameter. Those are the arguments, that is Apple symbol. Next, printing that for our reference. Now next, function results, and then calling the function. So this will automatically call the get stock price function and will return the stock price of Apple. So this is where you can integrate with your own application. Now printing the result for our reference. In this, we parse the response and then ran the function. We got the result. Now we need to send this back to the large language model. To do that, messages.append. We are adding to the messages history. We are providing the tool, function name, and function result. Now the final model answer, response equals client.chat, and passing the model and the messages. Now printing the response for our reference, and now everything is complete. So as a quick overview, we added two things. One is added the function or the application, defined the schema for that application, added the tool to the client.chat. That is one. Second, we executed that function and returned the results back to the large language model. Now we are going to run this code. Python app.py, and here is the answer. So first, when we asked what's the stock price of Apple, then it called for the tool as before. Then we are executing that function get stock price with the parameter symbol Apple, and we got the answer current price of Apple is this. Then we return that value back to the large language model, which is Mistral, and Mistral large is returning the current stock price of Apple is $181.42. That's it. Now you are able to integrate your application to a large language model, Mistral, using function calling. I'm going to quickly show you one more example. Here the user is asking what's the status of my payment to a bank, and we have already defined the list of tools to the large language model. So the large language model is going to use the transaction ID and run the function, get the status of the payment by executing the function. Then that information is sent to the model, and the model gave the final answer saying that the transaction ID has been paid. So here is the bank application. So you can see the database here. So it could be your own database or MySQL database or Postgres. We are loading that data in pandas frame. Then we are defining two different functions. One is retrieve payment status and retrieve payment date. As before, we are defining the schema for those functions for the large model to understand. Next, we are passing the tools to client.chat as before. Now one thing happened. The user didn't provide the transaction ID. So the large language model knows that a tool requires a transaction ID to check the status of the transaction. The large language model is going to ask again to the user, what is the transaction ID? Then the user is responding back saying my transaction ID is this. Then the large language model is going to use that transaction ID and then do the function calling. Then as before, we are parsing the response from the large language model, executing the function, returning the function results back to the large language model by appending that to the messages. So messages contains the whole history, and finally it's sent back to the large language model, and we get a final response from the large language model like this. Now I'm going to run this code. Python bank.py and click enter. And here you can see database loaded successfully, and the user is asking what's the status of the transaction. Now the model is responding. To help you with that, I'll need the transaction ID. Could you please provide it? And the user is sending the response. My transaction ID is this. Then the large language model is doing the function calling, providing the transaction ID. Then we are executing that function and returning the status that is paid. So retrieving payment status is our own internal application. So we are integrating that application with Mistral. And finally, we get a response saying that the status of your transaction is paid. This is amazing. I'm really excited about this. I'm going to create more videos similar to this. So stay tuned. I hope you like this video. Do like, share and subscribe. And thanks for watching.